at the bottom, there's a square with an arrow pointing up.
Okay.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. We're super excited to have Gary Chupik with us this week. He is a mindset, I'm sure that I'm not even like doing you justice, but mental performance coaching. You've worked with a variety of athletes, a variety of people. I know he sent out his bio earlier this week, but really excited to have him on. I know he's going to highlight and share a couple mental performance lessons, and he said that he has all of his best stuff for us. So super excited to have him. Gary, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for having me on. It's a privilege to be with you today, and I'm excited to be able to share a couple things with you. What I'm hoping to be able to do is share one or two exercises with you and kind of walk you through them that I think will be very, very helpful to you. And then if you if you have any questions, we'll leave 5 minutes or so at the end of the half an hour together for questions and answers. So I'm not sure I'll have the answers, but I'd be happy to share with you what little I do know. So one of the most common things that I hear repeatedly from athletes is that they think too much, and their thoughts actually hurt them rather than help them. And sometimes it is that dichotomy between what helps us and what hurts us, but oftentimes it's the overthinking piece that is a real struggle. And so one of the ways that I like to think about overthinking is that having too many thoughts, or the number of thoughts that we have, I kind of associate them with calories. So if you have too many calories, then what happens to you that you don't expend? Well, you sort of slow down, you get a little bit lethargic, maybe you can go into a carb coma, or you've eaten too much, and over time those thoughts will weigh you down. And in the same way, when we control the amount of thoughts that we have, and that way we can sort of figure, okay, well, how many of those thoughts can I expend? And especially when it comes to endurance sports, I want to make sure that I'm thinking the right thoughts and the right amount of thoughts. So I think it's really important to control really not just the good and the bad, or what's helpful or not helpful, or productive or not productive. I think it's really important to talk about just the number of thoughts. And so that thought limitation, or just finding that sweet spot for how many calories you can have in a day, that's just the perfect amount. I think that's really important. So because I heard this so often with the athletes that I work with, I've created an acronym. And that acronym that I'm going to share with you, and I'll share my screen with you, is called CAPE. CAPE. And so this is really it'll help us to limit the number of thoughts that we have. So I'm going to share my entire screen here. Okay, so can everyone see?
Yes.
Okay, and then can everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So this is called, it's not just focus control, it actually controls the number of thoughts that we have. So it kind of depends on the sport that you're a part of. You can use this a lot of different ways. But what I find really helpful is that we can sort of discern which thoughts really help us, and what type of protocol can we be thinking about as we're participating in our sport. So I've created something called CAPE. So CAPE is an acronym for control, assess, plan, and execute. Okay? Control, assess, plan, and execute. So when we're involved in a sport or in a high pressure situation, the very first thing that we want to do is control ourselves. Okay, so that's physiologically sort of gain control of your body, because you're such a connection between your mind and your body. And so oftentimes one of the greatest ways to do that is just to be able to take that, either a double breath if you're already exercising and you're already involved in a long distance sport or run or an endurance sport, but And then if you're not running and you do have a little bit of a break, just take that deep sigh. It's the universal messaging from your body to your brain to relax, and vice versa. So it's kind of like, everybody relax, take that deep breath. So what we want you to do is we want you to go into a neutral mindset while you're taking that deep breath. So a neutral mindset might not be, your thoughts might not be positive, and they don't have to be, they certainly don't want them to be negative, but we can be in a neutral mindset, because all that we're focused on is just sort of just resetting and thinking about what it is, or what the task is in front of us. Okay, that's all that we're thinking about. So if you were playing, let's say, football, you might, go into a huddle, and you just all you do is you worry about the next play, so to speak. And when you're in an endurance sport, really what you want to do is just kind of keep thinking to yourself, okay, what do I need to be doing right now? Okay, and stay as neutral as you possibly can. The second part is to focus on your body. Okay, so focus on the relaxing of your body as much as possible. And then you might even develop a little routine. That can be hard to do while you're involved in the sport at that moment, and especially in endurance sport. But just sort of just like, if you just need to take that double breath every, every 10 steps or every 20 steps to be able to just kind of remind your body just to relax. So the first thing is control. The second part is assess. So assess the situation, which is gather relevant information. So assessing the situation for every sport, it's going to be different. For every part in a sport, it could be different. But your brain is magnificent. It's like a computer. It can take in so much information so quickly. It's remarkable. So just be able to just give yourself a moment to assess the situation. Okay, so it could be weather related. It could be, information gathering, through your eyes. It could be information gathering through your nose or your ears. You're just going to like set aside an intentional moment just to assess a situation. Number 3 is to make a plan. Okay, so sometimes your plan can last, for minutes or even hours, or it could last for just a moment. Okay, so it's make a plan. So make a plan and visualize that plan in your head as much as possible. The second part is commit to your plan, if possible. Like just kind of commit to it. Like, this is what I'm going to do, and simplify your inner dialogue. So that's the conversation that we have with ourselves. There's different kinds of self-talk, but what we want to do is just simplify that talk. We don't want to have long conversations with ourselves when we're involved especially in an endurance sport. Okay, we want to simplify the dialogue. And then the last part, the E, stands for execute. So control, assess, plan, and execute. And execute has 3 parts. Number 1 is trust your plan, because you just committed to it. So trust your plan, trust your training, and trust your instincts. And we want you to trust your plan, because that'll give you confidence. Okay, trust your training is, you put a lot of work into this, and all that training is led to this moment. So trust your training. And then trusting your instincts, we need you to do that as an athlete to be at your very best. So trust your plan, trust your training, and trust your instincts. Okay, so I want to stop there for a moment, and I want to open it up to questions that you might have about this. I know that was a little bit of information. I thought maybe we could wait till the Q&A at the end, but since we're in the meat of this little part of it, what kind of questions do you have about CAPE or thoughts?
I'll ask, do you feel like this is more beneficial for people to do in the moment or before a moment? So in terms of like a race that's coming up, do you feel like a little of both is beneficial, or is this plan better whenever you're maybe actually in the race and you're kind of going through the motions during the event? What would be your thoughts there?
Yeah, both, for sure. Yeah, because if you do it pre-event, if you think about it, you're gaining control of yourself, you're assessing the situation, you're making a plan, and you're executing on that plan. So you might have a protocol, a pre-race protocol that you have before you race. And what I find this helpful to do is, I don't know about you, but when you're involved in a endurance sport, and you've got that time before a race, maybe it's 20 minutes before a race, or 30 minutes, or 15 minutes, and your thoughts sort of start to wander a little bit. You go in with the plan, you go in with the protocol, but then your thoughts start to wander a little bit. And then sometimes that pressure can get to you, and that pressure can lead to panic at times. You're looking at everybody else. The moment starts to get larger, and you start to really think about, you start to compare yourself to other people, or wonder if you're ready and you've done everything. You can just simply go back into this cape, right? And in this moment, I need to control myself. In this moment, I need to assess the situation. What's going on around me? What's my plan? Well, maybe I should go for a walk, right? Maybe I should spend some time by myself. Maybe I should listen to some music. So you can do it in that moment as well as using it during the race. So whenever it feels beneficial to you is really the short answer, Ashton.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
You also talked about simplifying as you're kind of self-talking to yourself. If you have multiple things that are popping up, do you kind of start with a thing that is that immediate top of mind, or how do you kind of approach it if maybe there's one or two things that are really kind of like weighing on you in the moment?
Well, so you have to expend the calories, right? And so one of the ways that you can expend the calorie is to do something about the thought that you have. So if you have a question, let's say a thought that comes into your mind, and now it's taking up space, right? You have a real question about something. So you can go and try and expend that energy and find the answer to your question. So that's one way of dealing with it. Another way of dealing with it is that self-talk. So there's three, if not four, different kinds of self-talk. And pre-race, and even during the race, I would only allow myself to have all of my talk fall into these 3 or 4 categories, right? So your self-talk is you could do like calming self-talk. Okay, so just kind of calm and relax. There is motivational, and there is primarily instructional. So those are the 3 primary there's a couple other minor categories, but those are the 3 big ones. And if you can limit your self-talk to those 3 things, and be aware that any of the self-talk that I'm experiencing right now has to fall into those 3 categories. And if they're not, then we just have to learn to dismiss and discipline our thoughts.
Good.
It's a very disciplined approach to what you're thinking, because we want your thinking to enhance your physical exertion. So how could this be helpful to you as a group here listening to this? How do you feel like this could be helpful to you as you're thinking through your own application?
I think it's good to not overcomplicate things. Yeah, but I kind of thinking about the plan is something that takes time to understand what works for you. You kind of go there and experiment with nutrition.
In
A couple cents.
Okay, how else? Anybody else? How could this be helpful to you? Okay. All right, let's share another exercise, if I may, Ashton.
Yes, please.
Okay, so give me one. I'm going to share my screen here again. And here we go. And I wanted to share one other one. So we talked earlier about the kind of like hitting a reset button. I want to share that reset button And I'm having a little bit of a hard time finding it here. Well, let me just talk about it. That way, I apologize. I thought I had it pulled up, but I didn't. Sorry, my brain's not 100% with my COVID here.
Of course.
So I want to talk about two more things. So one of them is thinking in neutral, and one of them is the reset button. And they kind of work together, but it's really important, I think, as we're thinking about our thoughts and how they affect our ability. So there's two parts. There's part A and part B. So part A is that reset button. So think of a red reset button. Okay, so I have one here, literally on my desk. Okay, and that reset button, think of it kind of it like a computer, right? And have you ever had too many programs or too many tabs open on your computer, and your computer starts to slow down? And at some point, you just think to yourself, well, man, I got to restart my computer here because it's really, really operating very slowly. And so in the same way, the reset button is like resetting your mind, okay? So the most important thing that we can think about when it comes to the reset button is that we have to cut off the negative, I call it negative toxic blood flow. Sometimes our past thoughts, they distract us from what's going on in the present moment. And so when we want to perform at our very best, hitting that red reset button is crucial. And so what it does is it just sort of resets us, it resets our thoughts, it resets the situation, and we can go into that situation sort of with a blank slate. Okay, so that red reset button is really valuable. And what's magical about the red reset button is that you can use it in multiple scenarios in your life. And so how you practice the red reset button for sport is by doing it in your daily life. And so the trick is to hit the red reset button as often as you possibly can. Okay, especially when you find your thoughts starting to swirl downward, you can hit that red reset button. Okay, so for example, let's say I've gone in, in one meeting or one conversation that I had, it had some negative overtones to it, or I'm bringing in some negative emotional baggage into my next conversation. But what I can do is I can hit that red reset button in between the conversations so that I'm fully present for my next meeting or my next conversation, because that conversation or that person deserves my very best. So I will hit that red reset button often in my life. And even though I have a home office, when I leave my home office, I can hit that red reset button and have a conversation with my wife or have a conversation with somebody else. And so it really is about having and giving my very best to the present moment so I can be helpful to the people around me. So red reset button is really important. And then part B of that is go into neutral thinking. So once you hit that red reset button in your mind, you just go into neutral thinking. Now, what is neutral thinking? It's just thinking about thoughts in the present moment and not having judgments about what is right and what is wrong. And kind of like that idea of thoughts being like calories, when we judge too much, it actually slows us and weighs us down. So in other words, think of it like going to a restaurant and, a typical day, a typical restaurant, and think about all the judgments that we're making. We like the food, we don't like the food. We like the service, we don't like the service. We like the waiter or waitress, we didn't like the waiter or waitress. We didn't like this. The music was too loud. This. We're making just literally hundreds of judgments. And what it does is it drops us from being at our very best and enjoying that moment. Well, it's the same thing in sport, okay? So when we have so many judgments that we're making about ourselves primarily, but about everything else that is going on around us, we're making these judgments, it's really slowing us down. And so instead of thinking, obviously the negative thoughts really work, but they work for the bad, okay? They're very effective. They just don't help us, okay? So you have your negative thoughts, it's really easy to understand that that's not helping us. But you also have your positive thoughts. Now you're thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute. Aren't I supposed to be positive and think all these positive thoughts? Well, there's probably not a whole lot wrong with thinking a lot of positive thoughts, but sometimes they can distract us too. Okay, the positive thoughts can distract us from what we really need to be thinking about and doing and concentrating on and focusing on in the present moment. And so you do have this idea where, that if we're not controlling our thoughts and we're letting our thoughts wander, and some of them are positive and some of them are negative, and then there's judgments, you can kind of see how your mind and your thoughts are all over the place. But resetting and going into neutral thinking, sort of, it's kind of like bringing in the fence a little bit on our thoughts. Like, I like to think of our thoughts as sheep sometimes, and the sheep will wander all over the place, right? If we don't have a fence. But if we can sort of fence those sheep in and make it containable, and that way we can sort of monitor what's going on in our thoughts or in that sheep pen, then it's really helpful to us. You can address so many different things. And it's the same thing with our thoughts. Really, especially during endurance sports, we really want to bring our thoughts in so that they're not wandering all over the place. So you might say, well, positive thoughts are really helpful, and they can be, most certainly. But I think of it this way. It's like, what if I ate, 20 apples a day, even though apples are good for you, but if I eat 20 of them, then, well, that's not very helpful to me. I might feel sick, or I might feel ill, or I might not feel very good. In the same way, if we're sort of focused on just sort of being positive constantly, it actually becomes a distraction. And so hitting the reset button and going into neutral thinking can be very, very helpful for us. So what are your thoughts or questions or comments, or how could this be helpful to you in the sport that you're involved in? The reset and the neutral thinking.
2 questions I wrote down. The first one, I know that you had a physical red button. Is that kind of a good training, exercise, having something physical that you can touch to then apply it to just being mental if you're not actually in front of a red button?
Yeah, actually, one of the athletes that I learned this from was George Kittle from the San Francisco 49ers. He literally put a red button on his uniform. He's changed where it was. It used to be on his hip, and then he would put it on his elbow, then he would put it on his wrist, but he would physically hit a button after every play. And I think in the same way, if you can connect a thought with an action, it's even more valuable.
Yeah, I like that too. I think it's time to invest for a physical red button. It's a nice way to trick your mindset, I guess.
Very much so. Yeah, I actually taught this to a CEO of a company. And he, the next, I didn't know he was going to do this, but the next day he went out and bought a red reset button on Amazon. And then our next meeting the following week, he had showed me this red reset button. He goes, Gary, this thing is magic. It's amazing how powerful it is, because when I go from meeting to meeting to meeting throughout the day, and I hit that red reset button, something happens inside of my mind. He says, you should write a book about that. And I was like, yeah, maybe I should. So yeah, if you had a physical reminder, then that would be probably pretty helpful.
Yeah, that's good. I like Rob. He said that there should be a reset button in T1 or T2. And I think a lot of us can relate to that, especially if maybe one event didn't go as well, not taking that into, the bike or taking it into the run. Will ask, what do we think about or focus on when trying to keep neutral thoughts in a race setting?
Yeah, so I have a saying, at least in my business, it's don't listen to yourself, talk to yourself. Don't listen to yourself, talk to yourself. When you think about listening to yourself, most of those thoughts when we're listening to ourselves aren't under control, and they're just kind of flying in from everywhere. But if you can talk to yourself and practice that healthy self-talk, then I think you can sort of, control the thoughts that are helping you, right? And you can focus on those things. So yeah, I think going into neutral thinking really is about the present moment. So me personally, when I'm involved in an endurance sport, I will hyper focus on my breath work. And I mean hyper focus. And it is amazing what you can accomplish when you're not thinking about it. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been, let's say, on an elliptical or something like that, and you start using the elliptical and you get pretty good at it, or a rowing machine would be another good example. And when you're thinking about it, it's a little bit mechanical, right? But when you stop thinking about it, it's amazing how your body knows exactly what to do. It doesn't need all of the different steps and the mechanical parts. And a lot of that's in your training already, right? You're trusting your training, but your body is remarkable at knowing what to do. And so when you hyper focus on your breath work, then you can accomplish amazing things. And a good example of that is for me, when I was on the elliptical, and I first started doing the elliptical, which I was terrible at. It took me I had to stop 3 times before I did the elliptical, 10 minutes on the elliptical. And then I was able to do 11 minutes. And then I was able to do 12 minutes. And I did a 1 more minute every day that I was at the gym, which is 5 days a week. And I worked my way up to 57 minutes without stopping, at the highest level. And the entire time I was breathing through my nose. So I did nasal breathing. So my hyper focused on my breath work was really important. Then after 57 minutes, I had an injury. That's why it stopped at 57 minutes. But I got up from that not even breathing heavy, because I had just gotten in such good shape and I have really hyper focused on my breathing. So I would say hyper focus on your breathing and what you need to do in the present moment. Don't get too far ahead of yourself. Just kind of stick around in the present moment if you can.
That's good. I've had some conversations with some of my athletes that have been trouble sleeping recently. And that's one thing that we kind of talk about, where it's like, well, okay, your mind is just going insane. What's like just either one thing you can focus on, and breath is a great one, or, again, like I like the talking to yourself versus listening to yourself, because my voice that talks to me is probably a lot crazier than whenever I'm talking to myself. So that's very good. One other question I had written down is, in triathlon, we have 3 sports. So, you're kind of wanting to keep a neutral thinking, but you're also always thinking ahead. How do you kind of balance, or do you have any suggestions on balancing thinking ahead, but also still staying present with neutral thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great question. Can I go in reverse just for a moment, and then I'll address your question?
Sure.
When it comes to the sleeping piece, I've learned a trick that works magically.
Perfect.
And you can put this into practice. Mimic how you would breathe when you're sleeping. Mimic the rhythm of breathing as if you were sleeping. And if you hyper concentrate on the sleep, on the breathing pattern during sleep, you will fall asleep far faster. So it's a trick I learned. So
I love it.
And then in terms of multiple sports and looking ahead, so think of it looking through a windshield, right? You're driving a vehicle. Okay, so think of it this way: when you're gazing through the windshield, you're thinking about what's ahead, right? So you're in the present moment, right? And what you can do is you can glance at your side view mirrors, right? That's meant to, like, where am I right now? But you don't stare at the side view mirrors. You just glance at them left and right. The rear view mirror, and you're thinking about what's behind you, we only want you to glance even less at that, okay? Because when you're driving in the present moment, you do want to know what's on the sides. The rear view mirror is back there, but we really want you to look forward, be in the present moment, and look forward to what's in front of you, right? So we don't want you to hyper focus on something through the windshield. We just want you to have a general gaze toward the what's in front of you. So if you know that you're going to kick into a different sport again, yeah, we don't want you to hyper focus on that. We just want you to sort of keep your, keep looking forward, but don't lock onto something, if that makes any sense, in your thoughts.
Yeah, that's very good. That's good. Awesome. Anything else that you would share in 30 seconds, or that you didn't get to share tonight? Anything else?
Well, I would say that, the cape is really important. The red reset button is really important. The thinking in neutral is really important. And I guess the final thing that we touched on it, but limit how you talk to yourself. So, hyper focus on different categories of what you're allowed to talk to yourself about. And that is the calming self-talk, the instructional self-talk, and the motivational self-talk. And just limit your thoughts to those 3 things. And I think you can sort of stay in your lane and do really well.
That is awesome. That's very good. I know I personally took quite a few things that I'm going to be taken away from this. So I'm really excited. We really appreciate you coming. Everyone, thank y'all for joining us tonight. Next week, we are going to be doing a route recon on Texas 70.3. So if you are racing that race, you'll definitely want to attend there. But thank you for joining us. Gary, thank you again. Hopefully you get feeling better. And everyone, we'll see you next week. Have a great week.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.